So, all right. So I will start by introducing myself, though I think I am the common denominator of everyone on the screen. I'm Vanetta Young, an investment readiness consultant working primarily with women and people of color who are starting their first private equity, venture capital, or real estate fund. So my background is essentially that I came from private equity fund of funds world, and using my skill set as a writer with my skills on the limited partner side to work with folks to not get through their fundraise, but to build out the company that they are starting that investors feel really comfortable investing in. So I will say I am in Washington, D.C., and our last icebreaker went really well, but I did your favorite style of potato. Gonna shake it up a little bit this time in case no one is feeling hungry. And I'm going to do, what is your bucket list event? What is the event that you must attend before you die? Mine, it could be sporting, concert, absolutely anything. Mine is as Joe knows, I'm a big golf fan. It is the Wasted Management is what it's called, is the PGA Phoenix Open Waste Management Tour. It is the rowdiest golf event on the PGA. And it's not so much that I'm interested in the rowdy part, it's just bizarre that people would be so rowdy at a golf event. The only one in the like anywhere in the world like it takes place in Scottsdale, Arizona. And it just seems super, super, super weird, frankly, with a lot of white people being really messy, and I just want to watch it. So if you can give your name, what you do, where you're coming from, and your bucket list event. And I'm actually going to pass it to Denise. You're muted.
Okay, here I am. I said, thanks, Vanetta, for passing it to me first. How's everyone doing? I am Vanetta's assistant, so my job is to just make her life easier every day, which I try to do, but she's such a perfectionist. You know, it's hard to work for people who are just so perfectionist orientated, but no, she's a wonderful boss and I love her. So that's my everyday is Vanetta Young. And my bucket list event is, oh my, I have so many. Although I'm afraid, and I grew up in Alaska, but believe it or not, I've never been skiing. So one of the things I want to do before I leave this beautiful place is learn to ski. So that's one of mine. That's the first one that came to mind. So that's it.
Nice. That sounds really cold, but not as cold as Alaska. So
I mean, most of the time will be spent in the cabin, but you know, we'll venture out to the mountains here and there. Just for some baby lessons.
Exactly.
Nothing major.
All right. Who wants to go next?
I'll pass it to Joe.
Oh, thank you, Denise.
You're welcome.
Denise, my wife and I have been watching a show called Living Alaska. It's like a House Hunters, but only in Alaska, and we've been enjoying it.
Really? Yeah. There's some beautiful homes there.
It is an eclectic, crazy place. There's bears walking around, moose everywhere. Yeah. It's like one of our favorites.
It goes from one extreme to another. Like 1 minute you can be in a totally metropolitan area, and the next minute you're in the outback, you know, like in the wilderness. So, but I mean, I love it. I mean, it's a beautiful place. I mean, you should visit, definitely.
That's the one thing we've gotten out of it. I may not live there, but I do want to visit.
Yeah, I don't ever want to live there again either, but it's beautiful to visit.
So since I missed that, where are you? Or what's the beautiful? Oh, I thought you were saying that
Alaska. You were... Denise, you said you grew up in Alaska, right?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
I'm far away from there now. I'm in Atlanta.
Okay.
Okay.
Polar opposite ends of the place of the U.S. at this point. Yeah.
I loved Alaska. I did visit for a week. It was amazing.
Oh.
I think I'm trying to think of the name of is it Ketchikan? I'm trying to think of the name of this really small town we were in, and I walked into a pub and I was sitting at a bar and I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, population 83 or something crazy. So I asked the bartender, I'm like, what's the population? Is it really 83? He's like, yeah, it is. And the guy who's like 5 feet away from me at the bar is like, actually 82. And then the bartender's like, oh, that's right, so-and-so. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is nuts. It was really unique, but absolutely beautiful. I agree. So sorry, I got totally stuck out of the meeting. Hi, everyone. I'm back.
No problem. You haven't missed the thing. You haven't missed the thing. We were just doing intros and only Denise and I have gone. Denise is my assistant. And so Joe, you are next up.
Sure. Next up. Yeah, sure. My name is Joe Cope. I'm a co-founder of a multifamily office called Cope Corrales. We're an individual RIA. We serve high net worth individuals, families in a comprehensive planning. Known Vanetta for quite some time. I live in Washington. Actually, I live in Arlington, Virginia, right outside the river. But been in DC for 22 years. And got to know Vanetta on a friendship basis, and then we've done business since.
And your bucket list event?
Bucket list item, sorry, I forgot about that. Is I will go the opposite direction of the Waste Management Phoenix Open. I have been there. I've never been there for that event. I've played that golf course, but I would love to go to the Masters. I have yet to go to the Masters and enjoy all that is to offer that beautiful golf course. Love to play it maybe more than just go there, but that's my event. I got to go.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know that it will ever be any more interesting than it was in 2019, but who knows? Tiger winning the Masters might have been the peak of the Masters, but
right.
we can, it might be more interesting at some point soon.
So Vanetta, it's safe to assume Tiger's your favorite. I was going to ask
No,
Joe
that's the other thing Joe knows about me is that I love hate watching. I don't have a favorite golfer because I hate all of them, and I really enjoy hating all of them.
Amazing, quite amazing. The text during compliments.
That is wonderful. I love that.
So, well, thank you, Joe, for being here. Who would you like to pass it to?
Nicole, but you came in, so let's
Oh, so we're doing like name, where you are, what you do, and your bucket list event. What's the event that you must attend before you die, be it sporting, concert, anything?
Wow. I feel like I've had a lot of time to digest that and consider it, but I will. I'll try to do this. So I'm in the Hudson Valley in New York right now. I usually sit in our Manhattan office, where I have not been since March 12th, almost coming up on a year. Pretty sure I left like a cup of water there. Kind of skeptical as to what that will look like when I get back. But yeah, I'm with a mid-size accounting firm. So it's Citrin Cooperman. We're a national firm. And I work on the tax side, but I do mostly consulting. And I sort of specialize in a couple of different areas. One is helping emerging brands. So it ends up being a lot of startups, whether it's tech, product, beauty, food, all that kind of fun stuff, food and bev. I am otherwise industry agnostic, but when it comes to the startups that are growing fast and booming and the Shark Tank targets, I end up in the emerging brand space more often than not. And then I sit on our tax M&A committee globally. So in addition to helping startups grow and go 1 to 5, I do a lot of M&A work. Like I'm swimming in it right now. So I don't know if that was too detailed, but anyway, I'm in the Hudson Valley, and that's who I am and what I do. And let me see, I think I'd love to go to the Cannes Film Festival. Seems super cool place to go and be. So maybe sometime.
That sounds really nice. I remember the weirdest news story I've ever heard in my life was maybe 2 years ago, that women were required to wear heels, and they only in the past couple of years have put the kibosh on that rule. And it was just like, well, the anchor who covered it, he was obviously in Cannes and everybody else was in New York, and they were like, that was the dumbest story I've ever heard. That was just an excuse for you to go to Cannes and just have a great time without us.
Wow, that's unbelievable, right? Like I can't even comprehend. So okay, maybe well, if I can wear my flip flops, it'll work.
And now apparently you can.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And then Vanetta and I got to know each other from via Ruston, I guess, sort of initially. We met, we're doing some work together on a new emerging brand startup, and then we got connected. She seemed really cool. I think I just totally like found your email address and stalked you until you connected with me. So.
And I appreciated it.
Yes, Vanetta is totally cool. But I was going to piggyback on what you guys were just saying about the high heels, because I want to add for the record that if Prince was still alive, my number one bucket list item would be a no-brainer. So just wanted to add that.
Awesome.
I love it. Marilene, would you like to go next?
Yeah, happy to. So I'm Renalini Leela, and I'm a placement agent. I work with Thomas Capital, which is based out in this, outside of Seattle, and I'm based in New York, working out of my home office. I've been here about 2.5 years. Previously, did various different things in the alternative investment space, starting out in more kind of corporate finance, working under the CFO at Citi Alternative Investments and Lehman Brothers. I was there at Lehman Brothers during the bankruptcy and was involved in separating Neuberger Berman out of there, and ended up at Neuberger Berman for a little bit and had an interest in moving more into the private equity space. Joined Stepstone Group, was doing investor relations and research papers, working with the CIO on developing white papers on different topics. And it was all really good, but I wanted to do something a little bit more client facing and decided to actively move on to a placement agent role. It was a good fit with my background and skills and more client facing. So it was a natural progression. And along the way, most unexpectedly, a role at Partner Connect conferences came about. A friend of mine who worked there at B Hub, she kind of pointed me in that direction, and it wasn't something I was necessarily looking to do, but it was a really interesting way for me to really develop a lot of relationships in the industry and be a more effective placement agent ultimately. So yeah, enjoying my role here very much, and we work with a lot of emerging managers. It's the trend currently in the industry, and so it's touching all of us in one way or another. And I'm happy to be here, learn more about emerging managers, share what I know about emerging managers, and continue this discussion. And my bucket list item, I've been trying to think of trying to come up with one since you asked that question. But I've been pretty good about, like, I'm not like a huge events person, so usually my bucket list are places and some events which I've been pretty good about, like, getting it done. So this is going to be a really silly one, a little nerdy maybe. The one event that's actually an industry event that I haven't been able to go to yet, which is really popular, is the Women in Private Equity conference that Beth Falk organizes. So I haven't made it to that, and maybe this year, maybe next year, I'd love to make it to that. Again, not like a big, not hardly like a bucket list item, but that's something I'd like to attend.
But that's the one in Dana Point, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, because that sounds so nice. And I once heard Kelly Williams talking about having a drink outside by the fire, and I was just like,
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard so many good things about just kind of how nice and like the environment is, and how special it is in terms of like just kind of a getaway, but also just meeting other like-minded women in the industry, getting some connections and making some deals even happen. And I think the focus is growing a little bit more in that direction from speaking to Beth. So yeah, if anybody has more information to share about that, or good or bad, I'd love to hear.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And so good of you to choose something that's so productive, both relaxing.
Yeah, that's why I said nerdy. So I feel kind of embarrassed choosing that, but
not at all. Well,
The
Lori,
Lori
thanks
is
for
Tax
being
accountant
here.
on the line. That's as nerdy as it gets, probably.
Say that again.
I said she's got a tax accountant on the Zoom call. It's probably as nerdy as it gets, so don't worry.
Yes. I won't take that away from you.
About
I have to say, I was going to say Burning Man, but I might change it to the Dana Point event because I didn't even think about that. Because
Been to Burning Man, Lori.
is
Stick
what?
with it.
I've been to Burning Man. That was on my bucket list for a while. And then
Right?
it happened.
Yeah, I don't know.
I
I'm
have
thinking
to
I'm aging
recommend
out
it.
of I think I'm aging out of Burning Man. I think I like the idea of Burning Man more than the reality. Like if I actually get there, I'll be like, ew, gross, where's the shower?
Yeah, I definitely grew out of it.
But the Dana Point event, I do know about that. It's actually like almost impossible to get in. You literally have to sign up the day that it ends the year before.
Wow.
Yeah, you have to set your calendar and it sells out because while the women are there, they sign up for the next year. So it's virtually impossible to get into it. So I set my calendar because I'm also dying to go to that event. And I just put a reminder for myself in there. And you can join, like you could pay, it's like a couple $1,000s to join that organization ahead of time. And I don't know if it gives you like any advantage whatsoever. It might, but I saw no point in joining that until this September's event is already sold out for 2021.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, I'll join right before the 2022 event and hope that maybe it gives me an edge because it's a couple $1,000s to sign up. And I'm my own boss. So that's like, I'm an entrepreneur also. So I can't, I have to count my pennies at this moment.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, Joe, I'm sorry. I'm sure that's incredibly boring for you to hear, but this is like an unbelievable women in finance event with thousands of women actually at this resort in California.
Yeah, Dana Point's gorgeous, by the way. That's unbelievable. It used to be a St. Regis, I think. It's stunning.
Yeah, once I get into that event, I am like going forever. Like, so anyway, I'm Lori Gleeman. My firm is Soul Equity Solutions. I recently met with Vanetta. So glad to meet you. I work with private equity, middle market, lower middle market, family offices, and independent sponsors. And I help them locate service providers. So I'm sort of a business concierge for private equity firms. And I help them assess and vet and reference service providers in order to align them with the best service providers. So that's what I do. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for coming. And the funny thing is, like, I do have my little talk prepared about storytelling and messaging, but my manager has decided not to show up today. So I think I'm still going to run through my talk, but I would love to basically hear a little bit more about how you all serve emerging managers, or what capacity you serve this particular population. But yeah, I guess I will run through my little talk since we are recording this for some folks who I knew wouldn't be able to make it, but would love for them to know more about who all is in this community in terms of who's in their corner, who is buying for them. As you all know, that emerging managers have the sort of preconception that is true to an extent, that it's a really difficult road out there. And there is this sense of being lost in terms of, well, who are service providers who really do have my best interests in mind, who aren't trying to take advantage of me, who aren't just trying to, take all the little money that I have. But then also giving them an understanding of the importance of having a placement agent, or a tax accountant, or working with someone who is an RIA who can introduce them to family offices, or someone who is a concierge for their vendors. So I think this is an excellent group to have together. I hope you can all find other ways to connect too, because I can definitely see ways that you would all be sort of mutually beneficial to one another. But I'm going to jump into my little spiel. If you have questions for me afterwards, I would love if you ask them. Pretend you are an emerging manager and you need some help in this capacity. Feel free to ask me any questions, and then would love to, like I said, talk a little bit more about the ways in which you help this population. So I am going to share my screen and can everyone see my screen okay? Cool. All right. Good. And we will start. All right. So, oh, hold on 1 second. Okay, excellent, excellent. All right. So, topic for today that I know is really, really important to LPs. As for those who don't know, I used to be an LP, and that's actually how Marilyn and I got to meet at an annual meeting, which, now that I think about it, those were really fun days, annual meetings, being in the same room as hundreds of other people, eating food, collecting swag. We'll get back to that one day. But one of the things that I know that is really important for emerging managers to grasp is this idea of storytelling and messaging, because we have to remember who LPs are, in the sense that LPs are people. They're not necessarily deal people, but they're people. So I think the core to thinking about storytelling and messaging is establishing resonance. It's that sense of saying the right thing at the right time to the right audience. And I stole this off the internet somewhere because it just like rang in my head so well, this concept of resonance with, you know, right person, right message, wrong time, obviously. So the 3 keys to establishing resonance are to know your audience, communicate your value proposition effectively, and to maintain the authenticity of your narrative. So those are the 3 keys that I'm going to flesh out a bit more for us in the rest of our time together. So when I say that, you know, storytelling is really, really important in terms of approaching LPs, it's the sense that LPs likely aren't deal people. Yes, they probably have some, and they might have some investment banking experience, or they could be like me. I had 0 deal experience before I went to the LP side. So giving me a lot of details about the technicalities of a deal, which I find is kind of a natural way that GPs speak about the work that they do, wasn't going to be helpful for me, because I just either wouldn't have known what they were talking about, or just wouldn't have really grasped the importance of the message that they were trying to give me. And I think there is also the sense of, you know, knowing who you're speaking to and who's going to be responsive to what information you have. You know, perhaps a family office might be a little bit more comfortable with taking certain types of risks, rather than a pension plan, which might be a bit more conservative. So these are just things to think about as you're putting your message together. I always want to emphasize the importance of story, because people don't remember data, and which is ironic because this is an industry full of analytical people who know numbers. And I recently heard a stat that said you're 22% more memorable if you use a story rather than using data. I hate things like that, because I'm like, I've not seen the study that said that they came out with that 22%. And so that 22% might be made up. But the fact that I remember that 22% kind of flies in the face of exactly what I'm saying. But it is that sense of, you know, if you give people a bunch of numbers, they're not going to be inclined to remember that, but they will be inclined to remember people, and they will be inclined to remember context. I think in order to communicate your value proposition effectively, there is that sense of wanting to ground it in narrative. You know, making sure that your words are going to be really visual and using statistics when they're fireworks. So you can very easily say, if you were a private equity person, I bought this company for 4x EBITDA. I went in, made some operational changes. 5 years later, I sold it for 8x. Not very memorable. But if you say, no, I encountered this management team and this company that was based in the town where my grandmother grew up. And I found that, they reminded me a lot of my family and this story, the family legacy that I was trying to build. So I went in and we made some operational changes. For example, we set up a new IT infrastructure, and we were able to give them a new dashboard for how they can keep track of their KPIs. In that sense, I hope you see what I mean, in the sense of making your words visual, using that sense of who are the people who are involved in this story. And using stats when they're fireworks means, I have one client who tries to do more social impact work. So if we were to say, 75% of the businesses started in 2020 were started by women of color. Now, totally made that up, but the fact that I was able to put a stat on something that, so if I were saying, I invest in women and people of color, and 75% of the businesses that were started last year were started by the very demographic I'm trying to reach, you've now just added lighter fluid to the story that you had just told me. If you need help thinking of a framework for how you tell a story, how do you bring a story to an LP, because you don't have forever to sit there and go through every last single detail, you can think about a couple of things. PAR, which you might be familiar with from your job interviewing days, problem, action, results. I think of this a little bit differently, similarly, but a little way that I can wrap my brain around it a little bit better. I use SSN, not social security number, but something I learned from my family. First step is see what had happened was. Second, so I said. Third, next thing I know. There is that sense of context. Was the problem? Reaction. What was the action that you took as a result of that context? And impact. What was the result of your action, and how did it affect you and the people around you? Everything that you do isn't going to be just about you or about the company. Your end user is your LP. So how do you talk about this in such a way to frame it to, this is the impact that ultimately I had on my investors? So you can think of it either way. Problem, action, result, or, as I've heard from my uncle many times, see what had happened was. So I said, next thing I know. In the writing world, this is called a narrative arc. So this framework is actually used in every book, every movie, every short story, any type of story that you have encountered actually uses the same arc. So the folks who are listening to you are actually just a lot more accustomed to hearing a story told in this fashion, and it's just kind of a little bit more natural way for people to receive information. So maintaining the authenticity of your narrative means staying completely who you are as you talk about what it is that you do. I did find that some of the GPs that I met with when I was at Abbott, it felt that they were trying to be who they needed to be for us to give them capital, and that literally never works. So they might even think of a way to stray from the pitch deck that they had in front of them. That is actually not a great way to build conviction in a limited partner, because they want to know who you are, because they're investing in you. They're not investing in your deals, past or present. Yes, the money that they give you will be invested, but they're trying to determine if you are a trustworthy person. And so I say, there is no supposed to. There is no way that this should be done. Yes, there are frameworks to make things easier, but one should never feel that, I have to deliver this message in a certain way. I have to sound a certain way in order for people to take me seriously. You just have to be who you are and tell your story. And I think there is that sense of going back to knowing your audience, that your audience might vary, but your content never does. If you think about perhaps the first job you had out of college, the way that you talked about that job to your grandmother might have been different than the way that you talked about that job to your friends. My family has never understood any job that I've had except for when I was a copy editor. So they understood the whole correcting grammar thing, but none of the other jobs that I've had. So I definitely have a lot of experience in this. So again, it's not so much that you have a different job. It's just that you are telling the story in a way that is resonant to the audience that you are speaking to. And you are staying true to that. It's not like you got a different job when you're talking to your grandmother versus when you're talking to your friend. I do want to emphasize that there is no supposed to. I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to do that. You're supposed to is to be completely and totally who you are, because you are sufficient and you have everything you need to tell this story. So at the core of what I do is working with my clients so that they have confidence in what they do, resonance in what they say, and influence when it's time for them to deliver. So that at the end of the day, in their fundraise, they can go farther, faster, better. And so for the folks who are listening in and want to give this a try, the homework that I would give for this is to, jot down who your audience is and really take a minute to assess what might be relevant to them, depending on what type of investor they are. Excuse me, if they're a pension, think about what might be important for someone who's going to be a little bit more conservative. If they're a family office, think about how you might express the more creative elements of your investment strategy. And I'd also encourage you to write out your value proposition in the standard fashion of this is the way that I would normally talk about how different I am from my competitors. But then integrate those elements of storytelling and try it in the PAR or SSN, if you will, framework. And then, I also want you to list out you're supposed to. What do you think that you're supposed to do? And do those supposed tos feel authentic to you? And if they don't, the next question is, what does feel authentic to you? And how can you do this in such a way that feels genuine? Because ultimately it's that genuineness that's going to give investors conviction. If you find that this is easy, please let me know. If you find that this is difficult, please let me know. I love hearing from people and seeing if these exercises are remotely interesting. Exactly. So thank you all so much for listening to my little talk here. I would love to take any questions that you all might have, especially if you're pretending that you are an emerging manager. And if you have no questions, I would love to talk for a little bit again about how you guys serve this population.
I guess I have a question. So in this communication that you're talking about, are you talking about when it regarding marketing your services, or perhaps it's across the board, whether it's like something you're putting on LinkedIn or the pitch book, like?
Yeah, no, excellent question. Definitely across the board. I think it's a good framework to use if you have very little space. If you're saying, like if you have a one pager, there's only so much you can talk about. So make sure that everything counts. So how do you really get your point across in that short amount of space? If I'm covering at least, this is the problem that I address, this is the way that I address it, and this is the result that I'm looking for. You can maximize your space in very little of it. Obviously, it kind of works a lot better when you're in a pitch meeting or something like that, and you can have a little bit more of that time and space to really pull out the narrative. But yes, definitely use it like across the board.
But I don't know question really here, but I like what you have there. It's really an interesting approach, an interesting take, to to talk about storytelling. I was listening to that presentation more from like a fundraising pitch standpoint, maybe because that's my perspective.
Yeah.
But that's really, really important because, GPs can really tend to just blabber numbers, and really it is a story that counts, and perhaps a combination of story and statistics even, but just not statistics alone. Yeah, no, I like that. And I'm curious, when you work with different emerging managers, are you really helping them with the pitch development, and are you helping them like even write like the PPMs, and can be really an important document, are an important document, um, and sometimes they're not putting in as much attention to that. So are you helping with those material development?
Definitely. So that is, I would say, probably the core of the work that I do with them. I do a lot of focusing on the operational infrastructure and helping them think about, what is the team and capacity that they need to deploy the fund that they want to raise. But the biggest part of that is, okay, well, now how do you communicate that in a way that inspires conviction? And how do you do that, like we were saying, kind of across the board? Is this, is your website reflecting the story that you're, the values and the story that you're trying to tell?
Mhm.
I am finding in the written document, I wasn't expecting to do as much of the writing as I find that I am doing, but I'm a little bit of a control freak about it, so I don't think I'm going to stop doing it. So it's definitely a
You
service.
should do it. I think it's like such a needed skill set. And, nobody has the time and patience to write. And if that's coming naturally to you, that's a really good use of your skill set.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And actually, since you are a placement agent, and we had a really interesting chat about the use of placement agents on our last call, can you tell us a little bit more about the process of what you are looking for, particularly in emerging managers, and what are some sort of common pitfalls that you feel that they can avoid or try to avoid?
Um, so yeah, we work with emerging managers. It's definitely like a challenging road ahead for them raising their first fund. And we try to prepare them the best we can. We are very selective, obviously, with who we work with, because we want to make sure we take on a manager who will ultimately be successful, who we are able to help really. And so uh, yeah, I think like just one, I'll tell you a couple of my own observations. One was I felt like there was one emerging manager that we worked with where um, I thought they weren't always consistent with their story. I
Hmm.
feel like they were a little bit taking a little shot in the dark, and just kind of seeing what sticks, and both in terms of like messaging, but also in terms of their own investments, because there's slightly they were generalists, but they were trying to adopt a focus, and so they I feel like their sector areas changed over the time that I did the fundraise for them. So that's kind of what I mean with like, changing the story a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that can be a little dangerous. I noticed, I picked up on it, and I was on their side. Obviously, I'm trying to raise them money for them. But if LPs notice that type of shift, then it's going to raise a red flag. And in the market being so competitive, um, you know, it's only one mistake away from being turned down, and so you have to be careful. The other thing is, I'm just trying to come up with some thoughts here off the cuff, but the other thing I just noticed recently is another group that we're working with. They've created a new team within their organization, to raise a more sector focused fund. Now this team, they are experienced kind of independently, and they've kind of one has been on the buy side, one of the partners has been on the buy side, one has been on the sell side, and they've kind of transacted together, and have known each other a long time, but they haven't really worked on one team before, and now they are on one team. And having run emerging manager conferences, and having spoken to so many LPs who are bombarded with new emerging managers who they have limited amount of money to allocate to, you really have to stand out. And one of the things that I consistently hear from limited partners is that you team risk is a big risk. And, you know, even if you guys know each other a long time, we could just need to see that you are gelling together as partners. And if it can be a deal breaker, because if there's another emerging manager who doesn't have that team risk, I mean, you just lost out. And so, you know, there are ways to work around that team risk, do some deals kind of on an independent sponsor basis, deal by deal basis, and get a little bit of experience as a team, show that you have some track record as a team, and then you know, you'll just kind of mitigate that risk for LPs. So those are just a couple of examples that came to mind, but I don't want to take over this conversation and let others talk. So hopefully that's helpful.
No, that is very, very helpful. And I'd like to get a sense from the rest of you really briefly, if you have an interest in, you know, garnering more business in this space, and how would an emerging manager use someone like you all? I think, Lori, for someone like you, it's a pretty easy, but, you know, how would an emerging manager take advantage of the services that you provide to make their lives easier and better?
For me in particular?
Oh, yeah, all of you, but yes, go ahead.
Sure. So for me, I guess, like you said, it's sort of self-evident in a way. So my service is introducing private equity funds, emerging funds with new service providers. So for me, utilizing my services and being able to properly source and assess service providers and align the two parties in skill sets and experience, and also very much in a value system of how will two people get along, is really critical when making a proper match between two parties. They have to have the skills, they have to have the right, you know, if one's boutique, then perhaps they want to work with another firm who's also boutique, who might have better pricing, who might have senior level executives who came out of one of the bigger funds perhaps and just started their own firm. So they're more flexible and more nimble, as an emerging fund manager is as well. So that's where I come in, and just helping to align them with the proper sources that might be great in terms of skill sets, in terms of pricing, and in terms of mentality. I think that's how I can assist emerging managers.
Lori, I mean, I'd never heard of the service that you provide, and I think it's so critical. Like, you know, an emerging manager coming out, they have so many responsibilities to be able to find a resource like you to help them find other resources.
You just went on mute.
Just went on mute.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to slide the screen.
Zoom seems a little haunted today, right? Like I switched. The two of you and Nicole sort of switched spaces on my screen. But thank you.
Yeah.
I
but I'm kind of curious, is there like are there others like you? Is it a real, like, you know, just you creatively came up with this, or
it's
are there
a good question. It does seem like I created, but no, there is another firm that does this, that actually I noted, and they inspired my service. So there is one other that's been doing it since 2014, quite successfly. So I seem to be the second one in the space.
Oh, nice. And Barry, I'm curious also, two other things. So how are you sourcing these emerging managers? How are you finding this client group? And then also kind of curious what you did before.
Yeah, so my background is an executive search recruiter. So I've been in search since 1999, and most recently I was in search in middle market private equity, sourcing C-suite executives for the private equity firms and their portfolio companies. So I already have like a search trained kind of
natural transition.
That's how I've lived my whole life since 1999. I've been search, so I have like a comes naturally to me to sort of align people and align parties and assess
Right.
people and assess skills. And I guess I already came to this with built-in network of private
Yeah.
equity firms because of my days recruiting. But it grows every day, and a lot of it is word of mouth. I am very, very networked. I go to a ton of ACG events and women in finance events, and I run my own networking events. And I'm just introduced to people constantly. But emerging funds are harder for me to find. I don't know how to find them actually. I'd love to,
Yeah.
because those people have the greatest need for my services. Of like stable, bigger funds, they kind of have their players in place, and I can fill in gaps here and there, but it's the emerging funds that will need many, many introductions. So if anybody knows how to find them,
Yeah, let's talk
Like-
offline. Let's talk offline. I have binders full of those names. For you.
ooh, yay, thank you. Yeah, I sent you a LinkedIn connect request, so
Yeah, I
maybe we
saw
can
that pop up.
find
Yeah.
a time to connect, but that would be awesome. Thank you.
And super quick in our last few minutes, Joe and Nicole, how would you guys, what would be the best way for emerging managers to take advantage of you?
Sure. Yeah. Nicole, do you want to tee that up or?
No, go for it, Joe. I'll go after you. Thanks.
Yeah, we're a little unique. We're an RIA that manages core assets, but also believes and utilizes other asset classes, low risk assets, using insurance-backed products, real estate, private equity, and venture capital. It's areas that most advisors won't touch or will find every excuse to get away from, but that's not our DNA. Our DNA is to use these. So we're actually open to meeting different managers. Obviously, ours is a fiduciary capacity, so we're very in tune with risk, specifically for our clients and for ourselves. So there is some degree of cautiousness with which we approach deals, early funds. But there are an appetite for high net worth individuals and really high net worth families to look at, deal by deal. We're very interested in that. I think that kind of in some ways limits risk when you can kind of go in deal by deal and you understand the operators in those individual deals. Nicole, I think I know who you've been involved with, and I am. I've been involved with emerging brands. In fact, I don't know if do you know Serena Johnson or Sean Howard down in DC?
Yeah, those are my deal folks. Sean heads our M&A group. So
Yeah.
Sean and I are pretty much on phone calls like 3 to 5 times a day. Yep.
Yeah,
He put me in touch with Sean, and I now bug Sean periodically with questions from my clients.
Yeah, so we have some mutual clients with Sean. We brought you guys in to do the tax work and consulting on some M&A. We do a lot of GovCon.
Perfect.
Government contractors are a lot of our clients. So anyway, so we're always open to learning and to meeting new managers on the VC side, on the PE side. We like our diligence, know that up front, but it's certainly something that we want to be able to bring to our clients. We're always open to building those relationships.
Awesome.
Great. Yeah, and so I guess I'll wrap it up, but I really work with entities at so many different levels because I'm mid-size and because of my background over the last 20 years. I work with everyone from fund managers and the high net worth and tax impact to them to, due diligence and M&A, deal structuring and all of that. I mean, I think, it's tough sometimes with the emerging managers. Sometimes they don't know what they don't know. We'll see a missed election, right? Like stock options granted or stock is granted. And like that, there's like 30-day window they have. And next thing we know, someone invests and goes to sell a year later and there's a huge, tax impact, double what it really needed to be. So I think, the challenge for us is oftentimes, there's a few, but one is they don't have that team in place internally. And of course, it's the struggle between the spend and the need. Right. And so you've got someone wearing too many hats, by no fault of their own. They don't know where to begin. And they're a little hesitant to reach out to us. Obviously we can come in with our back office team and do all the back office work, not me, but another group within my firm. And, we have that outsourced CFO role that specializes in private equity and can come in and do all of that. So that, as well as, again, not having sometimes they're like, okay, I've got this great attorney. Okay, that attorney might be great for that industry, or it might be great for a deal, or it might be great for one or the other, but you need maybe a whole team of attorneys so we can work together on the tax side as well. And they think, oh yeah, my attorney looked at this. Well, that doesn't mean that it's the most tax efficient structure for us. So a little bit of everything, I think obviously, like anyone here, the sooner we get just brought in, like the open lines of communication are just so important. Because yeah, look, we're at fault too. Sometimes you assume, oh, this person knows, they've been in private equity for years. And they just don't, and so just that constant communication. And for me, I like the FaceTime anyway. So this has been a great time this past year, and being a tax person, I'm getting more FaceTime than ever with my clients. But, things just come up, like a guy like Bobby, right? Vanetta, we'll go back and forth in an email, but 30 minutes on the phone, and it's like, whoa, this stuff comes up that we had no idea about. So yeah, but I know we're at 1:32, so I'll stop there.
Oh, thank you all so much again for, I think particularly for the folks who go back and watch the recording, this will be really illuminating. And like Nicole said, I think there are some unknown unknowns, but not even so much that it's the, where can I get help in ways that I didn't even need help? And I think that is the value of having a community like the ones, having a community like the one that I am bringing together. So thank you all so much again for coming. I hope you will come again next month, first Wednesday of the month at 12:30 Eastern. And hopefully we'll have some managers on the docket then. I know a couple of folks are kind of in the trenches in terms of getting deals done, it being almost the end of the first quarter. But so I really do appreciate your being here, and looking forward to connecting with you all again soon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank-
Good to meet you
Nice
guys.
meeting everyone.
Alaska.
Nice to meet everyone. And Vanetta, thanks for organizing.